Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm Rick Fussell and this is the Ingrain Workshop. In today's video, I'm going to be installing a Grizzly 10-inch cabinet maker's vise on the side of my outfeed table. So sit back, let the supervisor know that you're hanging out at the Ingrain Workshop, and that's an automatic free pass. Well, not that kind of free pass. So let's get started. So this is the Grizzly, not sponsored, 10-inch cabinet vise. But fun fact, you can grab an identical Yoast vise from Amazon for 20 bucks less, and if you've got Prime, it'll be at your door faster than you can decide where to mount it. I'll leave a link in the description below. You're welcome. Now the packing. Nothing fancy, just cardboard, styrofoam, and some plastic. No velvet lined box, no instruction manual, because let's be honest, these companies assume we know what we're doing. Every workbench setup is different, so they just throw it in a box and wish us luck. This particular model is the Grizzly H7788 cabinet maker's vise. The screw is a hefty 1 3/16 inch diameter by 15.5 inches long, and the overall size is 19.25 inches long by 10.25 inches wide, which means it's got some serious bite. First, I'm removing the nuts and washers from the two side rails. Once that's done, the side rails slide right out, but make sure to keep the guides with them. Next, I'll remove the screw from the underside table mount. At this point, you should have the front jaw mount and screw, the under table mount, two side rails, side rail guides, washers, and nuts. And if you have any leftover parts, well, let's just pretend they were extras. First things first, I'm making a mounting template because precision is key, and also because I'd rather not have a bunch of oh crap holes in my brand new outfeed table. To do this, I'm using painter's tape, which is basically the duct tape of careful people. I'll apply it to the front of the under table mount and then cut out the profile with a razor blade. It's like arts and crafts but with sharper tools and fewer glitter explosions. Next, I'll grab a 13/16 inch spade bit and from the back of the under table mount, mark the center hole locations for both side rails. Then I'll switch to a 1-inch spade bit to mark the screw location. And just like that, I have a perfectly accurate template for my hole locations, no guesswork, no regrets, and no messed up outfeed table. Alright, this is where the vise will live, but before I can go permanently modifying my brand new outfeed table and risk the supervisor's wrath, I need to do some prep work. First, I'm adding a 2x2 filler block where the vise will mount. This does two things. Number one, it lowers the vise so it's flush with the bench top, and then second, it adds depth for better grip. I chose a 2-inch filler to match the 2-inch drawer rails next to it, because if I'm going to do this, I might as well make it look intentional. Now, I'll spare you the details, but let's just say there was some cutting, sanding, staining, and cussing involved to make sure the filler blends in with the outfeed table. Most of it will be hidden behind the back jaw of the vise, but you'll see a couple of inches on either side, so yeah, it had to look good. With the filler piece ready, I used F-clamps to hold it in place. Then from the inside of the drawer compartment, I pre-drilled and countersank some 1 3/4 inch GRK screws to lock it down, because nothing says permanent like driving GRK screws into your new outfeed table. Now before installing the under table mount, I needed to prep the underside of the tabletop, because just slapping it up there wouldn't cut it. The mount needs to sit about 2 inches below the bench top, so I had to fur it out to create the right spacing. To do that, I stacked a piece of 2x material with a 1/2 inch plywood spacer and locked them together with 1.5 inch brad nails, because nothing says they're staying put like a bunch of tiny nails firing at high velocity. I made the filler piece the same size as the mount, plus a couple of extra inches on either side for good measure. Then I pre-drilled, countersank, and pre-screwed some 3.5 inch GRK screws into the filler. Why? Because installing this thing upside down while fumbling with screws was a great way to develop a new curse word. Now it's time to get rid of the Grizzly green. I mean, they're not sponsoring this video, so why keep it? Plus, here at the Ingrain Workshop, we only roll in black. If you're enjoying the video, then please hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us out, and it really helps push this video out into the YouTube universe. With the prep work finally done, I can put my hole template to use. First, I mark a line 2 inches down from the bench top and another one in the center of the compartment to pinpoint the vise location. As you can see, the template overlaps both the stretcher and the filler piece, which is exactly why that filler piece was necessary. With the template in place, I laid out the hole locations. I made sure everything was level and used an awl to mark the hole positions before removing the template. Now comes the fun part, drilling the holes. With my backside clenched tight, because this part always feels like a point of no return, I went to work. These are just pass-through holes, so they don't need to be an exact fit. In fact, they need to be slightly oversized to allow for easy installation. For the side rail holes, I used a 1-inch Forstner bit, and for the main screw hole, I went with 1 1/4 inches. I wasn't too worried about blowout since the back of these holes land inside the drawer compartment. But if that were a concern, a scrap board clamped behind the exit holes would prevent any tear out. Now from inside the drawer compartment, I can install the under table mount using some 2.5-inch GRK screws. With the vise officially mounted in the outfeed table, it's time to focus on the vise jaws. For that, I'm using 8/4 yellow heart. Why yellow heart, yes? Because that's the only 8/4 material I had in the shop, so yellow heart it is. And let me tell you, there's a reason this was the last 8/4 board left in the shop. It was as twisted and wonky as a seesaw in a 1970s playground. Remember those? How about the death spinner, where you and your buddies would run in circles, hop on, and immediately regret it when you realized half the floorboards are rotted or missing? And let's not forget the slides back then. Solid metal, sitting in the Florida sun. By the time you hit the halfway point, your backside was on fire. And there was no fluffy mulch waiting at the bottom, just a good old-fashioned fire ant bed. If that's not a stop, drop, roll training course, I don't know what is. Anyway, back to this wonky lumber. I need to straighten it out, so I'll start at the planer using a planer jig. If you want to build one, check out my jig playlist. I've got a video on how to make both a planer sled and a table saw joiner jig. First, I'll shim up both corners until the board sits flat on the jig without rocking. Then using some hot glue, I'll temporarily secure the wood to the jig and the shims. Quick safety check before I start the planing process. Let's talk about something that should be in every workshop, quality eye protection. I'm using the HTS Hunter Sky E60 anti-fog safety glasses, and here's why you might want to grab a pair. They're ANSI Z87 certified and OSHA compliant. That means they meet industry standards, so your eyes stay protected from flying debris, sawdust, and random projectiles you didn't see coming. Clear anti-fog lenses, so there's no annoying fog up when you're deep in a project or when the supervisor drops by. Plus, they block harmful UV light and help reduce eye strain and keep your vision sharp. Wraparound side shields give you extra protection from the sides without reducing your peripheral vision. All-day comfort, they come with rubber nose pads and non-slip arms, which means you won't be constantly adjusting them while you're working. Whether you're in the shop, the yard, or at the range, these safety glasses have you covered. Plus, they're supervisor approved. Check out the link in the description to grab a pair. Now let's get back to the build. Now time for the fun part, running it through the planer. At first I'll just be knocking down the high spots, as you can see here, but eventually I'll have a fully flattened face. At that point, I'll remove it from the jig, flip it over, and plane the opposing face until it's good and true. Next, I'll grab my joiner jig and head over to the table saw to cut a square edge on one side of the board. Once that's done, I'll take it out of the jig, place the freshly cut edge against the table saw fence, and trim the opposite edge. Just like that, I've got a board with 4 square sides, which means I've officially tamed the twisted beast. Now it's time to lay out the final lengths. Both the front and back jaws will be 16 inches long. With that marked out, I'll head over to the miter saw, make the final cuts, and then smooth everything down with the Orbital Random Sander because nobody wants splinters while tightening their vise. Back at the table saw, I'll cut the back jaw to its final depth of 5 inches and the front jaw to its final depth of 6.5 inches. Pro tip, on the front jaw, I'll cut a slight 1-degree taper on the bottom inside face. Why? Because this little trick helps the vise work properly. It ensures that when you tighten the vise, the top of the jaw contacts the workpiece first, and as you tighten, the bottom follows, giving you full, even clamping pressure across the entire jaw. To keep everything in place, I'll use double-sided tape to temporarily secure the front and back jaws together. Now you might be wondering, why did he cut the back jaw 1.5 inches shorter than the front? Good question. That's so it can sit under the overhang of the table. I could have made them the same size, but that would have meant notching out my bench top. And let's be honest, I wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. With the jaws clamped to the bench top, I can head around to the drawer compartment and mark my hole locations. Just like before, I'll use the same spade bits to punch a center mark for each hole, this time on the back side of the jaws. With my jaws still taped together, I'll head over to the drill press. I'll start with the side rail guide holes, drilling these only on the back jaw using a 2 1/4 inch Forstner bit. My depth stop is set at a 1/2 inch so I don't accidentally drill all the way through and turn my vise into an accidental picture frame. Next, I'll swap to a 1 inch Forstner bit to drill the side rail holes. This time I'll go through both the back and front jaws for a clean pass-through. Then I'll swap one last time, or so I thought, to a 1 1/4 inch Forstner bit and drill out the screw hole, again going through both jaws. Oh wait, I almost forgot. One more bit swap, this time for a 3/4 inch Forstner bit to drill out some bench dog holes in the front jaw only. These are spaced 1.5 inches from each end with one right in the center. I drill them to a depth of about 1.5 inches, deep enough to hold a bench dog but not so deep that they'll double as an emergency snack compartment. With a chamfer bit chucked up in my trim router, I'm going to soften all the edges and holes. The chamfer depth is set at 1/8 inch, just enough to keep things comfortable without rounding it over too much. On the back jaw, where it meets the outfeed table, I'm leaving those edges sharp so it sits flush. Time for some finish. First, I'll tape off the areas where I don't want any finish because I'll be applying a self-adhesive rubber there later. But before I apply the finish, I'm going to install the rail guides since this side of the back jaw will be pressed against the outfeed table and won't be getting any finish. With a little persuasion and maybe a few choice words, I was able to seat the guides into the holes. Then using a self-centering drill bit, I pre-drilled and fastened them in place with some number 12 by 3/4 inch screws. Now onto the finish. I'm using a wipe-on polyurethane I grabbed from one of the big box stores. But instead of wiping it on, I'm using a foam brush because, well, I like to break the rules. I applied 3 coats, sanding between coats with 4/0 steel wool. And wow, did that yellow heart pop. It looks like cheese-flavored cotton candy, bright, bold, and guaranteed to make people do a double take. Next up, the handle. Using one of the cutoffs, I headed over to the table saw and cut it down to 1/8 inch square. Now there's a milestone moment here. Quick round of applause because this is my lathe's cinematic debut. With my handle blank ready, I mounted it to the lathe and basically just turned it round using a gouge until I got it down to around 1 1/16 inch diameter. Nothing fancy, just letting the chips fly. Once it was shaped up, I sanded it down to 220 grit, giving it that smooth, buttery feel because nobody wants a splinter surprise when tightening a vise. Now I decided to cushion my vise jaws with self-adhesive rubber, but you could also use cork if that's more your style, dealer's choice. I'll leave a link in the video description below in case you want to grab some for yourself. Using a box cutter, I cut the rubber to size and applied it to the areas I left unfinished earlier. Quick note, at this point I'm only applying the rubber to the front jaw. I'll have to wait before applying it to the back jaw because it also covers the cherry edge banding on my bench top. Now let's put this vise together. I slid the front jaw over the screw and side rails, followed by the back jaw, then secured it to the under table mount. With the back jaw in position, I can now apply the self-adhesive rubber to both the back jaw and the edge banding on the bench top. Once that's done, it's time for the final check. I'll tighten the vise and grab my torpedo level just to make sure everything sits flush with the tabletop because nobody wants a vise that pinches at an angle. Once it's level, I'll secure both the front and back jaws with screws, locking everything into place. From the back side, I'll pre-drill and countersink before fastening the back jaw to the outfeed table with 3-inch cabinet screws, making sure it's locked in nice and solid. With the front jaw level, I can now secure it to the vise. Using a self-centering drill bit, I'll pre-drill the holes, then fasten it down with number 12 by 1 1/4 inch screws. Now it's time to put everything back together. I'll reinstall all the drawers I had taken out earlier, and finally the grand finale, installing the handle, because you know a vise without a handle is just really a heavy paperweight. For the vise handle, I'll be using chair leg tips. Yep, the same kind that keep your chairs from scratching the floors. I'll leave a link in the video description in case you want to grab some. These come in 1/8 inch diameter increments, so I ordered 1 1/8 inch tips. Small problem, my handle is 1 1/16 of an inch. But no big deal, I'll just wrap the ends with electrical tape to build up the diameter a bit, ensuring a snug fit. Once that's done, the chair tips will simply slide over the ends of the handle, giving it a clean, finished look. And there you have it, a fully functional cabinet maker's vise ready to clamp, hold, and take on whatever projects I throw at it. Time to put this thing to work. Well, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, then please leave it a like. I'll leave links in the video description below to all the tools and equipment that I used on this build. If you're new to the channel and you like DIY and woodworking projects, then I highly recommend that you smash that subscribe button. It's free and painless, and I'd also ask that you ring that bell icon. That way you'll be notified of all our upcoming videos. To all my existing subscribers, I really appreciate all the support that you're giving this channel. I'm Rick with the Ingrain Workshop. Until next time, have a wonderful day and God bless.